Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show, final show of 2019. And of course, to join us to do that is the great Ana Kasparian. She is the host and executive producer of The Young Turks, also host of No Filter, which everybody should subscribe to on YouTube and iTunes as well. Ana, thanks a million for being here.
Hey, happy to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about impeachment, which we don't spend a great deal of time on this show. I'll restate my position, which is, Trump committed a crime. So and of course, as everybody says, the cliche, but there's literally thousands of things that you can impeach this guy for, including what we've learned. The only thing that I found interesting to learn in the past couple of months is actually high crimes and misdemeanors does not refer to serious offenses. It refers to things done by high office, which is fascinating. So actually, Congressman Al Green's effort from a couple of years ago to say this guy should be impeached for publicly promoting racism comes, at least for me, into full view, not to mention running concentration camps, kidnapping children, and millions of other things we could lay out. So, Ana, you actually helped clarify impeachment for me because I still have this huge skepticism about the Democrats, about the national security state, and how it would play out politically. What do you think in terms of being somebody who supported this, but also has this much broader view of how it's playing out strategically now?
Well, first, let me just say the fact that we have people on the left who are still skeptical about impeachment gives you a sense of how successful Democrats are, Democratic leadership is in bungling something that should be very easy for them to do. They're supposed to make a compelling case. And unfortunately, while some tout Nancy Pelosi as some sort of genius, the fact of the matter is she went out of her way to ensure that this impeachment was limited in scope. And she focused on Trump's dealings with Ukraine and the military funding for Ukraine, as opposed to, focusing on a much broader impeachment that includes his financial crimes, which I think more Americans would be interested in, more Americans would find absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the fact that there's proof, there's evidence that he has done illegal campaign contributions through those hush money payments. The Mueller report found at least 10 instances of obstruction of justice. They never focus on the fact that his own personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, who's sitting in prison right now, testified under oath that Donald Trump has committed fraud, both in inflating his assets in order to obtain illegal loans, and then later deflating his assets in order to commit tax fraud. I mean, there's so many different crimes involved, and Pelosi has bungled this by focusing on Ukraine, which is, by the way, a huge problem because it undermines our democratic process by asking a foreign government, coercing a foreign government to meddle in our elections and announce an investigation into Trump's political rival, Joe Biden. That's what he wanted. And so they already made that mistake. That's over, unfortunately. And now I believe that Nancy Pelosi withholding the articles of impeachment. She's not allowing those articles of impeachment to go to the Senate yet. I think that's also a mistake for two different reasons. Number one, and Cenk made this point, I hadn't thought of it, and it's an excellent and also devastating point. If Nancy Pelosi holds back the articles of impeachment, what if she releases them closer to the election date, or at least closer to the primary elections? That means that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have to put their entire campaign on pause in order to go to the Senate and, participate in this trial.
Right.
And so that would really screw Bernie Sanders over. And I'm terrified that that's what her thinking is. But let's say that's not her thinking. And she's decided that she's never going to take the articles of impeachment to the Senate. That's also a disaster because how do you think the Republicans are going to play this? They're going to say that Pelosi didn't have a strong case. The Democrats didn't have a strong case. They were too afraid to have Trump stand trial in the Senate. And look, when it comes to messaging, Republicans are always going to be better than corporate Democrats.
Right.
And so I'm terrified about what this is going to do in helping Trump, in boosting Trump. If I were Nancy Pelosi, I think a much better way to play this is to immediately send the articles of impeachment to the Senate, have Trump stand trial, have these Republicans on record exonerate Donald Trump, and then run the most aggressive and brutal campaign against those Republican senators. Look at these senators. They've enabled a criminal in office. Look at these senators. They don't believe in democracy. They're undermining our democracy. But when it comes to messaging, again, Democrats are weak, and I really don't know what Nancy Pelosi's thinking is. Look, of course he's going to get exonerated in the Senate, but maybe we could win, some Senate seats through a very aggressive campaign, and I don't know if she has it in her to do that.
I want to ask one more tactical question and then like in the bigger picture about how maybe the left can handle impeachment. But before that, I mean, my big worry is that you get to the Senate, and I have to be honest, maybe I'm too cynical. I simply just don't see, I cannot envision a scenario where any Republican votes to remove him. I just don't see it. Maybe Susan Collins.
I think you're right.
But so, and with her, I'm like, when I say maybe Susan Collins, I'm being generous to people I respect that are thinking that this is more possible than I do. If somebody said, hey, you need to put some money down, no Republican is going to vote to remove him from office. Now, I would put money down that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema will vote to acquit him. And I think Doug Jones probably will vote to acquit him. I don't think he's as disgusting as those other two, but I do think he's a senator from Alabama. Then they're in a position where they can run and say, not only was he acquitted, but we didn't, like, the Democrats crossed the line to acquit him. What do you think the play for that is?
I think you're absolutely right. But keep in mind that Democrats are always thinking about members of their own party who are facing tough reelection campaigns, right? And so they're thinking about Democrats in swing districts, and Pelosi always leads from a place of fear. But the fact of the matter is there are several senators, Republican senators, who are also dealing with tough reelection campaigns. Susan Collins happens to be one of them. And so if I were Pelosi, I would be laser focused on those senators and getting them elected out of office. Instead, she's so focused on Democrats in the House who are in swing districts and who are, very much concerned about their reelection. But let's move on. We have the House. I'm not as concerned about losing the House. I am concerned about not getting enough Democratic senators in place in order to prevent some of these, judge nominations from getting confirmed. The Senate's important, but Pelosi, I don't know what her thinking is. I hate the establishment Democrat talking point about how she's like some secret genius and she knows what she's doing. She's not a secret genius. She doesn't know what she's doing. Right. And in fact, if you look at the spending bills that she just helped pass in the House, they're absolutely disastrous in every way imaginable. They do nothing to help Americans when it comes to lowering healthcare costs. I mean, she brags about how she's a big fighter for that, but behind the scenes, she just gave the healthcare industry, the private healthcare industry, over $300 billion in tax cuts. Right. That's in the latest spending bill. Right. She's trash. Let's keep it real.
100%. And I think, and this is what I want to bring in. The left has not figured out a formulation, I think, for impeachment. And I guess when I say the left, I mean, I'm not saying people on the center left or liberals, and certainly not corporate Democrats, but I think people who are, on the left, some variation of it. And I think that runs the gamut from some people that are almost like in a reverse image of the kind of like silly resistance people who think that the world is wrapped up in all their melodrama about Trump, which they are not. And then on the other hand, there's other people who, some people identify on the left who all of a sudden think that, Trump is a secret genius and anything you could ever do to Trump is only going to help him. I don't buy that either. Right. But I think we need to find, but I do think the valid criticisms are, and one I don't want to get super into because I think you can simplify it and just say the dude committed a crime with regards to Ukraine that has nothing to do with endorsing hawkish policies in Eastern Europe, that has nothing to do with valorizing the intelligence and military communities. I don't want to call them communities anymore. It's ridiculous. And then the other thing, though, that I think is more salient from a messaging perspective is it does look ridiculous when they come out on the House floor and say that this guy is dangerous and undemocratic, which is objectively true, and then say, but we're going to give him a new Patriot Act, the Space Force he wants, totally unaccountable military budget. I mean, not only just bad things like the healthcare giveaways and SNAP, but the border wall, the actual funding of the mechanics of him and the Republican Party and many of the Democrats, for being real, running an empire and eroding democracy at home. That is a performative contradiction, and the left is 100% right about that. So what is the play in terms of how to balance those two things, in terms of how we make the case against Trump and Trumpism?
Right. Well, I think that two things can be true. I mean, you can acknowledge that Donald Trump is a criminal and that if he gets away with everything that he's done, it sets a really dangerous precedent moving forward, right? And you can also say that Nancy Pelosi and Democratic leadership have completely destroyed their chances in using this impeachment to their advantage politically, right? So there's like the moral question in my mind about holding Trump accountable, but there's also the political aspect of this. And in order to proceed with this impeachment in a way that doesn't actually hurt Democrats, but actually helps them, you have to be unwilling to work with Trump on nonsense things like the defense budget, the spending bill, all the policies that you perfectly outlined. But I think that this particular case does a good job in helping people understand how when it comes to Democrats and Republicans, corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, you're dealing with two sides of the exact same coin, right? And so we need real representation in the Democratic Party. Right now, we have very few members in the House and very few members in the Senate that do that for us. And so, look, I know that the general election is incredibly important. We want to get Bernie Sanders in. But it doesn't just stop there. That isn't even 50% of the fight, right? That's a small part of the fight. We need to get progressives elected into Congress so they can actually, can you imagine if Trump was getting impeached with strong progressives controlling the House and the Senate? I mean, this would be a completely different story. They wouldn't limit the scope of the investigation. I believe, and this is my speculation, so, think of it however you want, I think that corporate Democrats haven't gone after Trump over his financial crimes because they're worried about financial crimes of their own.
Ding, they don't want ding. 100%. Like, of course. I mean, and that's the other reason why, I mean, if you noticed, look, you could take the Russia stuff and they turned it into this embarrassing Manchurian candidate conspiracy theory, blew a bunch of theories out there that were unproven, that were false, that were ridiculous. What they could have done, and what they would never do, is actually say, here is definitely some meddling. Well, one part of it is there needs to not be U.S. and CIA meddling. But the other part of it, though, is that let's look at the whole system of basically how petrostates are buying Washington. Well, nobody wants to talk about that.
Right.
Let's be real. Right.
I know it's rich to hear about Russian meddling when Bolivia, just underwent a U.S.-backed coup. So, but the thing is, the Mueller report, it's incredible because they focus so much on that Mueller report. This is it. They put all their eggs in that basket. The Mueller report comes out, and even though there was damning evidence there when it came to obstruction of justice, they just dropped it. They just let it go. And so, unfortunately, I think that there are well-intentioned people on the left, people that I typically agree with, people that I work with, people who I really love and respect, who soured on the notion of impeachment from the very beginning, because unfortunately, the Russia investigation kind of set the tone for what they would think about the impeachment process. Right. And that sucks. It sucks because, again, Democrats really destroyed their opportunity with the Russia investigation. And so moving forward, you have all these bad decisions made with impeachment. And remember, on the same day that Nancy Pelosi made this big announcement about impeachment, what did she do? When they announced the articles of impeachment, she then had a press conference where she announced that she was going to be working with Trump on the USMCA, Trump's, his reimagined version of NAFTA, which isn't really that different.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's just ludicrous. And I think that's the juxtaposition of like the most extravagant, melodramatic, like trash TV conspiracy theories about Russia mixed with, oh yeah, but now we got to go do NAFTA. And it's just so ridiculous on both ends that there weren't more people who are like, all right, we're not going to buy into a whole bunch of overblown Russian nonsense. And at the same time, this motherfucker is disgusting, and we're not going to do a new NAFTA with him. I mean, how you don't pull that is beyond me. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.